Hey guys, I can't wait to dive into this week's episode in yet another sea of laundry. I'm sure you're all wondering what all these nautical references are about, and you'd be right to assume that this week's episode is about a place as wet as those sheets before the spin cycle. I've talked a little bit about where I came from, but over the short span of my life, I've moved around quite a bit. All that moving eventually led my family to end up in Northeast Georgia, which sits in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I've got plenty of stories to tell just about this area alone, but I'll save a lot of those for another day, like when I save pairing socks for last. On today's episode, we're getting to the bottom of what is called the most notoriously cursed lake in the United States. Some of you may have seen a video or heard about this lake on a popular reality TV show, but I assure you, it is far more fearsome in person. My husband even once said that the lake is like a greedy child. It sees something at once and it snatches it up. And when people go looking for what the lake has taken, the lake acts like a screaming toddler saying, "It's mine and you can't have it." Unfortunately, when I tried to give it my laundry, which I was almost positive would make it disappear, the lake wasn't having any part of that and I had to fish it back out again. I guess that could also be used as a safety measure if you ever decide to test your fate in its dark and murky waters. But from anyone that has been here long enough, don't go onto Lake Lanier. Anyway, go ahead and grab those baskets, get comfortable, and remember to switch that laundry with this week's episode, The Curse of Lake Sidney Lanier. The lake has served as a conduit for plenty of spooky stories for the people who have resided in the North Georgia foothills for decades. The lake, much like a large serpent, snaking through several counties, has been a hotspot for recreational boating, fishing, water sports, and even hosted the 1996 Olympics. Much of the stories consist of the Blue Lady, swimmers being grabbed by unseen hands, and even a vanishing ferryman. But this was not always the case. You see, Lake Sidney Lanier is a man-made lake that was created in the 1950s by flooding the valley and the towns nestled there. In 1956, the Buford Dam had reached completion and began filling with the waters from the nearby Chattahoochee River. Yes, the very same one Alan Jackson sang about all those summers ago. And also the neighboring Chestatee River flowing in from the north. The lake itself spans a massive 38,000 acres or about 59 square miles. It has 692 miles of shoreline for sunbathing and docking when it's at normal levels. The lake was given its name from a local poet that had written a poem about the beauty of the Chattahoochee River, but the lake was built for and operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to control flooding and provide drinking water to Georgia and parts of the surrounding states. Let me just add that the lake was never intended to be used for recreational activities. Sadly, in order to construct the lake, this meant that 50,000 acres of farmland would be flooded and would lead to over 250 families, 15 businesses, and supposedly the relocation of 20 cemeteries, including the corpses. Yes, I am more than skeptical of that having happened than when my kids tell me there isn't any more laundry hiding out in their rooms. There is a good portion of the community that believes the lake is cursed by the previous inhabitants of the land. Before the lake's creation, the town of Oscarville was thriving and even considered the Black Wall Street of Georgia. Oscarville was formed in the late 1800s during what is considered the Reconstruction era. The town was full of men and women performing trades such as farming, bricklaying, carpentry, and even had its own blacksmith. Unfortunately, tragedy would strike and leave its mark on the prospering community. In 1912, a 19-year-old white woman by the name of May Crow, who had been traveling on foot from Forsyth County to Gainesville down what is today Browns Ridge Road, would be found dead in the nearby woods. Adding a trigger warning here for SA, it was presumed that she had been sexually assaulted. Later that evening, when the sun had set, a mob of men and women known as the Night Riders came and drove the Black community out. This would also lead to the trial and deaths of 2 African American men, 16-year-old Ernest Knox and 18-year-old Oscar Daniel, who were presumed to be the attackers. A few decades later, what remained of the Black community residing in Oscarville would be forced to leave their community either by being bought out of their land or being forced out to make way for the completion of the Beaufort Dam and subsequently Lake Sidney Lanier. As the rivers flowed and the valley began to disappear beneath the water, so too did the towns that once prospered there. Not everything could be moved, and some things were even forgotten. During the drought of 2001, which caused the lake to drop 15 feet below full pool, the legendary Looper Speedway concrete grandstand could be seen peeking out of the depths. Some locals have spotted church steeples, tops of giant trees, and even headstones emerging from the dark waters during the drier seasons. If seeing gravestones isn't enough of a warning or an omen to stay away, the lake has become infamous for a suspiciously high number of deaths, either in or surrounding its watery grip. It is estimated that nearly 700 people have died at the lake since its completion. On average, the lake claims over 20 lives per year. These deaths have reportedly been caused by drowning, boating accidents, freak accidents, and even car accidents ending in submerged vehicles. Boaters have claimed that their watercraft would capsize after hitting something beneath the waves, but once investigated, nothing could be found that would have caused the boat to capsize. Others have claimed that a sudden rogue wave was the cause of their capsized vessels, when no other waves could be seen. A large portion of mysterious drownings have occurred during the calmest of conditions, and when the swimmer was close to shore. Those who were lucky enough to survive such a terrifying ordeal have stated that it felt like they were being dragged into the water by invisible hands. So, I've already provided enough reasons not to go in or near Lake Lanier. Gravestones, rogue waves, freak accidents, mysterious drownings, and even reports of people feeling like hands dragging them down. You would think that this would deter anyone from ever entering its clutches. Not to be the bearer of bad news, but the lake has more reasons lurking about to remind you to get out and stay out. The lake is host to a number of apparitions. One such apparition is that of a mysterious raft seen floating on the lake late at night. It's not the raft that witnesses find unsettling, it's the shadowy figure seen pushing the raft along with a pole, with his lantern's soft glow guiding his way, like the gondolier from hell. Those who have said to have seen the late-night ferryman say that he seems to appear and disappear out of thin air. 2 fishermen have stated that they witnessed the mysterious ferryman. It was about 1 a.m. on a cold fall morning. They had spotted the raft in a part of the lake that is known to be about 45 feet deep, which would make it virtually impossible for the ferryman to navigate with his pole. The 2 men watched the figure for a period of time before the ominous ferryman screamed and then hastily jumped from the raft into the freezing dark waters beneath him. The fishermen quickly noped right out of there, hoisting their lines, began to flee the area, but when their lights hit the area where the raft and its operator had been seen, there was no sign of the raft or the ferryman. The surface of the water was as smooth as a pane of glass. The most infamous apparition is that of the Lady of the Lake. In April of 1958, 2 young women by the name of Delia Mae Parker Young and Susie Roberts were traveling to the Three Gables, a local roadhouse in Dawsonville. Susie had been driving her 1954 Ford across the Lanier Bridge when the vehicle lost control and plummeted off the right side of the road next to the bridge. A search of the lake and the surrounding area didn't produce any evidence of the vehicle or the remains of the women said to be traveling within it. The only physical evidence to be found were the skid marks suggesting the car had entered the lake. 1 year later, in 1959, a local fisherman discovered human remains floating in the lake. Upon further investigation, the cause of death was inconclusive, and the remains could not be identified. It was also noted that the body was missing both hands and several toes. It was speculated that the remains belonged to either Susie or Delia. 31 years later, Susie Roberts' 1954 Ford was finally recovered. During preparations for new pillars to be placed for the bridge, the shell of the rusted-out car was discovered, and it still contained human remains in the driver's seat. Some personal belongings were found within the vehicle. a purse, rings, and a watch. These items led to the remains being identified as Susie Roberts, meaning that the remains found decades earlier were that of Delia. This unfortunate accident had led many to believe that the apparition of a young woman in a blue dress seen walking across the Lanier Bridge on Dawsonville Highway is that of Delia, as those who have seen the apparition state that the woman is missing both of her hands. Even after all the mysteries and terrifying encounters being reported, thousands of people still decide to swim, boat, and fish within the cursed waters of Lake Sidney Lanier. When someone comes out to visit us, they have to pass over the lake, but I always tell them the lore and legends associated with the murderous lake. Some like to test their fate, others heed its unworldly warnings. Tell me, would you test your fate in Lake Lanier? Well, my laundry is all cut up, and now I must face that very legend we just covered. You see, I have to test my fate daily as I live right on Lake Lanier and have to cross it several times a day. Anyway, I hope you have all enjoyed today's episode, and if you have a suggestion for a lore or legend you would like for me to talk about, drop me a comment or send me a message at lorelegendslaundry@gmail.com. Until next time, bye guys. And don't forget to switch the laundry.